I think next week when Anglo release their financials, we're going to get some very bad news about De Beers. So, De Beers have been the industry driver. At one point, Japan was a huge market for diamonds. Japan was the second largest, and it's gone. So just because a country was a big market at one point doesn't mean it's going to, once it disappears, doesn't mean it's going to come back. So
we're here at the FNB Post-Budget Conference hosted by First National Bank. And today we had various speakers speaking on different topics around what the minister articulated yesterday at the budget speech, Minister or Vice President Ndaba Haolaki.
I think the common thread from all the presentations was that something fundamentally needs to change. And for me, that something is our way of thinking and our way of doing things. As a country, it's time that we realize that the way we used to do things is what has led us here. And we need to make better decisions going forward. If we don't do something now, generations to come will blame us because we are the leaders of the season right now. Something has to change.
I think we got complacent as a country. Our diamond revenues have sustained us for so long. We have had consistent budget surpluses, but now we're having consistent budget deficits. We thought we were different. And so we got comfortable with that difference. Yes, we've managed our resources well, but managing resources is not the answer. We need to transform the economy.
We agree that last year was a recession. The Minister of Finance highlighted that growth is expected to have contracted by 3.3%, but they expect a rebound this year of around 3.5%, which we think is extremely bullish, given the fact that the recovery in diamond activity, even according from the ministry's standpoint, is towards the tail end of the year. So we're entering 2025 with no real growth driver. And if we also acknowledge the fact that synthetics are becoming a very real threat to Botswana's growth, as well as fiscal revenue opportunities, the cuts in production that we've seen all the way up from a De Beers standpoint are likely to be more or longer lasting than we actually expect them to be.
Welcome to the Growth Well podcast, where we tap into a well of knowledge, innovation, and leadership to fuel Africa's growth. Here, we explore thought-provoking insights and expert knowledge that empower individuals and businesses to thrive across the continent. Whether it's personal development or professional advancement, our conversations inspire action and impact. This is Growth Well, where ideas flow and growth begins. Let's dive in.
Yeah, welcome to Growth Well Podcast. We're here at the FNB Post-Budget Conference hosted by First National Bank. And today we had various speakers speaking on different topics around what the minister articulated yesterday at the budget speech, Minister or Vice President Ndaba Haolaki. But now we're just getting snapshots from different speakers on what they spoke about and some insights for us so that you at home or at work, you can understand and get some appreciation of some of the perspectives on the budget. Here I have Samantha.
Yeah.
Samantha, you'll help me with the surname again. And then if you can just introduce yourself, Samantha, in terms of who you are and then your role at Range Merchant Bank. Yeah.
Okay. So my name's Samantha Singh-Jami. I head the Africa Research at Rand Merchant Bank, based in Johannesburg.
Okay. And you are here to present on the perspective of it from outside. I'm always interested to see how people feel about the position of Botswana, because as you noted in my presentation, I always believe that we are actually underperforming in terms of the Botswana potential. So you compared Botswana to other countries in terms of where they can leverage, and how do you, from your presentation, how do you see Botswana economic-wise compared to the other peers in the region in Africa?
Okay, so I think first things first, there's always an emphasis on the credit ratings, and we've seen that across various presentations. And so I think from an economic standpoint and stability, Botswana ranks really high, obviously, close to Mauritius in terms of credit ratings. But other than that, when we look at it from social and human development needs. Obviously, it's ranked a little bit lower. And I think the emphasis has been around diversification, improving technology, so we can learn from countries in Africa. So apart from the global players, there's Kenya, there's Rwanda as well. So they're emphasizing a lot on the digital or embracing a lot more on
digital economy,
digital economies. But then also you had things like innovation where you've got a combination of digital economies and innovation, and it gives you something like an M-Pesa
from Kenya, yeah.
So I think, there's a lot to learn from. There's still countries where they are struggling in terms of diversification, and obviously those are the big oil-dependent economies on the
Angola,
continent.
your Nigeria, and so forth.
Angola and Nigeria. So those have taken a lot longer to try and diversify their economies. But I'd say most countries on the continent, including Botswana, it seems like, is on the right track. And I think with the new government, it seems like it could be achievable a little bit sooner.
Yeah. But Samantha, we've been on 80%, as Keith said, 80% in terms of forex from diamonds, in terms of the economy, and then 25% or 26% of GDP. I think for 30 years or even more. So we really seem to be struggling to break through from this. I mean, from the other countries and what you've learned from a bank perspective, what are like one or two things that we think Botswana can do a bit more radical to try and get the country on the right trajectory?
So I think when we look at it from our perspective, and there's a lot of governments where I think they're more proactive in showing off the potential. So they would do roadshows across the globe, London, US, just to give a sense of what their economy is about. And also you need to think about the private sector and investment flows, capital coming from offshore. So I think here, we've tried to tell Botswana, maybe come to the Eurobond market. There'll be a lot of investment.
Eurobond market.
Yeah.
Okay, just tell us more about that.
So just raising dollar funding offshore. And there's so much interest because everyone likes the story. They like the fact that, they're investment grade. So I don't think Botswana will be short of funding for projects as long as they're viable projects and, they can see sort of the revenue streams come through at some point in time. So I'd say, you'd probably want to market yourself a little bit more.
A bit more aggressive because, we've got all the right ingredients, but we just sort of failing to take off, isn't it? Yeah. Exactly. The other one, just the last point, it's interesting that Botswana has spent so much on education and health. As a percentage of GDP, we've always been higher than most countries, even the African countries. But it's interesting that you said social performance-wise, we're not so good in terms of obviously unemployment and health and education. Would you know why we
I think
why we spending the money but we're not getting the outputs?
I think the people in Botswana might be able to answer that one a little more with more accuracy. But I think the two indicators that we look at is the unemployment rate, which obviously is very high, and the income inequality, which is also
one of the tops in the world. Okay. No, thank you very much, Samantha. I really appreciate it. And all the best when you go back to your country. Cheers. Okay, back to Growth Well, and we're still at the FNB post-budget conference, talking about some takeaways from the conference. But now I'm really excited of who I have here. Tshepidi!
Oh, boy, I'm doubly excited.
Doubly excited. Fantastic. The pity this one is a short one, eh? Otherwise, we'll really have a ball, Yeah, so Tshepidi will introduce herself. Lives in the diaspora, very funky country, Morocco. And she was part of the presentations today. She presented on her company, which we'll talk about more about it in terms of infrastructure development, the role of infrastructure, obviously within the context of the budget speech yesterday. So Tshepidi, welcome to Growth Well.
Thank you.
And this is awesome. And I just want to start by just tell Botswana, who is Tshepidi?
Tshepidi, who grew up who grew up Mogorosi.
Okay.
Had the incredible fortune of having parents who sacrificed everything for our education, right? So every day I'm truly blessed to have parents who did everything they could to try and educate us, to give us the opportunities that we currently are able to capitalize on. So it's Tshepidi, Moremong. I currently live in Morocco.
Okay.
It's a country that I never thought
You'll end up there.
I'd end up there. When I was thinking about opportunities, I said, God, get me to Nairobi, get me to Abidjan. But clearly I wasn't specific enough in my prayers. El Mudim was like,
this is where you're going to go to.
This is where you're going to go to.
Yeah.
And working with them.
Casablanca?
In Casablanca. And working with an infrastructure fund called Africa 50.
Okay.
And our role is to bridge the infrastructure gap on the continent. We're owned by African governments and several institutional investors.
Select African governments, or most of the African governments?
32.
Oh, 32. It's quite a number.
Governments. So it's quite a number.
Including Botswana, yeah.
Including Botswana. So Botswana joined 2 years ago.
Okay.
And we are obviously, our ambition is to have all African countries as our shareholders.
Okay.
Yes. So our role is to accelerate infrastructure development on the continent. Very ambitious, but very doable.
Very doable.
And what we've been able to do in the past 7 years has been absolutely incredible.
Really? You've done some really super projects?
We've done some super projects.
Okay.
We've got talented Africans that we're working with. And we've done incredible projects across the continent. So it feels good to be in Botswana. And I guess my desire is to be able to do projects in this country.
Yeah, because that's what I'm edgy about. How the hell have you been there? You are the COO. And what have you done for Botswana in terms of any projects, any ideation at least, any thoughts? I know you presented quite a number of projects that are doing all over Africa, fantastic projects, but there hasn't been anything from a Botswana perspective that's been cooking.
When I say this with a heavy heart, because we have had several and many engagements in this country. But I think I opened up with a statement, which was many investors are saying, we'll actually deploy our energy elsewhere because there's no engagement from Botswana. Right?
They told you on your face. And you're just
to my face, right? And they're talking about countries which are seen to be high risk. Right? They're saying
less ratings.
In this country,
much lower ratings.
They're saying in this country, when government has decided this is what we want to do, we want to engage the private sector, they will execute. In Botswana, we have long conversations. We don't have time for the long conversations or no engagement whatsoever. So we're not willing to do it. And this is not hearsay because I've experienced it as a Botswana who's coming to my country and saying, we've got capital to work with you. And as I was saying earlier, this is a new government, this is a new administration. So my hope is that the engagement with the private sector will be one of partnership and trust, because the government can't do it alone, right? I was laughing with a former colleague, and they were saying, Tshepidi, we need to dust off this proposal that you and I and the team have been pushing for the past 5 years, right? So in my previous career, there's certain incredible ideas that we had to be able to implement infrastructure and enhance efficiencies within the healthcare sector, for instance, that fell on deaf ears.
Tshepidi, what is the problem whereby we've got, super professionals like yourself? Before we started the poddy, I did tell you about another professional, Botswana in Germany, who loves the country, wants to contribute. And I'm sure we got gazillions of examples that we can name. And they're just not lending, or the reception is not there. Now, apart from yourselves, but even just the infrastructure, for lack of a better word, to be recipient to ideas. And with this whole diamond story, that's a bit shaky now. I mean, why are we not like that? I mean, I'm asking you because we are contaminated. We are inside. We are in Botswana every day. We are mingling with
You're still hopeful, right? You're still pushing. And we need people to still continue to push because we can't lose hope.
Yeah.
I think we got complacent as a country. Our diamond revenues have sustained us for so long. We have had consistent budget surpluses, but now we're having consistent budget deficits, right? So with that came complacency. And one of the things I talked about earlier during this presentation was about Botswana exceptionalism. We thought we were different, right? And so we got comfortable with that difference, that we were this incredibly high-performing country.
All the ululations
right?
from the 80s, 90s.
We're a mono-commodity country. Yes, we've managed our resources well, but managing resources is not the answer. We need to transform the economy. I remember 20 years ago, going to the National Business Council.
Did you say 20 years ago? Or 2
maybe
years
it was
ago?
20. No, maybe it was 10, 15 years ago.
Okay.
And then I was on stage with a gentleman called Millard Arnold, who used to be with the central bank, or Bokim actually. And we were talking about diversification of the economy. Well, when I was a university economics student, and then 10 years later, I'm still talking about diversification of the economy. It's 2025. We're still talking about the diversification of the economy. Our problem in this country is that we don't implement. We're good at providing the strategies and not even the strategies, the policies, which gather dust, but we don't implement. So we need to acknowledge and accept that we don't have the implementation capabilities, farm it out to people that can. Many other countries are doing that and have done that. And that is what a PPP framework is. That's what it's there for. People who understand the risk, can identify the risk, can mitigate the risk, and can provide the capital and execute on a project. It's all about risk sharing. That's exactly what it is. That's exactly what it is. But I think it starts off, you talked about leadership in your presentation earlier. So it starts off what I've seen, the reason why many countries on the continent have succeeded in executing an infrastructure. It starts off with a vision. What is the strategic vision for the country? You talked about AI. You need to be intentional. So if you're saying we're going to develop AI, you need to be intentional about it. You need to go out and seek people who can bring it into the country. It's not just resting your laurels and saying I'm an investment grade country. That's not
insufficient.
That's completely insufficient. So it's the strategic vision, the political will. And with political will comes making sure that that cascades down to everybody within government, that we're all focused and coalescing and converging towards delivering on the strategic vision that we have for the country. That we're all singing from the same hymn sheet. That if Tshepidi comes in and goes from one ministry to the other, I'm hearing the same message. There are many countries on in this continent who do that exceedingly well.
And bigger countries, much
and bigger countries.
Yeah, 10 times Botswana.
I mean, I was laughing when this is Ghana district. You go Morocco. I mean, Casablanca is millions of people. Exactly. But you should see it. The king sets the vision, and the bureaucracy executes on that vision.
Reminds me of Dubai. Dubai does the same thing. They don't mess around.
They don't mess around. They understand what's needed. So I'm hoping that current administration sees the urgency, the enormity of the problem at hand.
That's the question I was going to ask you, because we're here because of the budget, under the auspices of FNB. And the question is, from the budget speech, did it give you a little bit of hope from the things you're saying, the vision, the infrastructure, and the rest?
So I think it unpacked some of the issues. It painted a very clear picture of where we stood. What was lacking for me was the vision. We had a long debate over dinner the other day with family around that. And they said, is the budget speech the place to put the vision? And I said, it is. Because we need to...
Because the budget is an instrument.
It's an instrument, exactly.
Yeah, it's an instrument. Yeah,
it's an delivery instrument. It's a delivery instrument, exactly.
Yeah.
So the vision needs to say, this is what the vision is, and this is how we are going to finance and fund that vision. And so when you allocate capital towards the different ministries, is that all fitting into the vision that we have as a country, right? That same singular vision that we're looking to deliver on. So that, to me, was what was lacking. The minister talked about 8,000 megawatts of power. I think that's great. But as I said earlier, what does that translate to? It's okay to export. Everybody around us wants to export power. But we need to think about it holistically. How do we create jobs? How do we create industries? How do we diversify our economy and use energy as a source to diversify our economy, but importantly, create an incredible value chain around which we can coalesce?
Sure. You know, such a pity that this is a short one.
No,
I'm hoping
it's
that
fine.
I'll have you next time, and then we can have a nice, relaxed
I
chat
hope
about what
it's
you
late.
do.
I
No, it's
hear
late
you.
as
It
well.
is late.
So I really appreciate it. I really hope that the insights you provided around infrastructure funding and what you do in Morocco, and as Mama Dala said, they are trying to listen more. They're trying to
Yes.
listen. I'm really hoping that they will listen to Botswana, even outside the country like yourself, and take these ideas, even use you. I mean, why can't they call you to come and...
I am here. We really do want to support this government. We do want to support. It's important.
Yeah.
Right. As a Motswana, I've always been proud of my country, and I want to even be prouder. But importantly, just giving dignity to the man on the street, the woman on the street. It's so important.
Yeah. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
It is such a pleasure, and good to see you again.
Lovely seeing you. And I loved your energy on stage.
No, thank you so much.
Really. You woke us all up. Incredible insights. And AI is something that we need to embrace.
I mean, the silence is just blasting me apart.
Deafening, right?
Yeah, it's deafening. You know, and it's everywhere. And investor wants to put money, and it can revolutionize our education, our agriculture. Actually, starting it up is not even very expensive.
It's
not
not.
like exact. That's the
Hello,
thing.
DeepSeek has just
Thank
shown us
you.
how you know.
Exactly.
Yes.
Jesus, I met like as a podcast. Okay, we are here again at FNB Post Budget Speeches or Conference. So, who's here? It's Keith. We're back again. Hopefully, we'll torment you again with the numbers. Welcome, Keith.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Good to be here.
Yeah, thanks, man. It's great to have you.
Yeah.
Now, it's what a milestone yesterday with the budget.
Yes.
And I reflected a lot. Yeah,
Monday.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I was reflecting a lot, obviously, from our... I still get a lot of questions about our podcast, by the way. Yeah,
me too.
Yeah. You?
Yeah. The momentous podcast.
Exactly.
That changed history.
Man. But anyhow, we've got the minister with his maiden budget speech yesterday. And even today, you could see, even after your submission, very sobering aspects. I think I told someone we were very pregnant in terms of expectations yesterday to see what comes out of here. So my very, very question is that when he ended that 3-hour-long speech, what is your, did you feel elevated, or what is your...
I was... Throughout most of the speech, I was quite elevated. I mean, he said a lot of important things about changes they want to make and commitments they've undertaken. But right at the end, he said, and the budget deficit's going to be 22 billion pula. And that deflated me because it worries me. It worries me because in the current year that's just finishing, we've seen the budget deficit go from 8.7 billion, which was in the budget last year, to an estimate of 18 billion, which was in the budget strategy paper, and now it's gone to 24 billion. I mean, it's a huge amount of money for government to borrow. And, you know, when I heard that it's going to be almost the same in 2025, I was a bit concerned that not enough had been done to really bring runaway spending under control. And you know, I say runaway because our revenues are performing badly because diamonds are not
Performing.
doing very well. So I don't think our revenue and spending are aligned. So I was hoping for more.
You are keeping up with the old trend of spending
keeping up with-
when the line is going the other way.
Yes, yeah. So that was a bit of
That
a
was a
downer towards the end of the speech.
Yeah. And I was also a bit concerned as well, especially with the, like you said, the 22 billion, and then the recurrent as well, because I thought, look, people say in politics you got to do the hard decisions earlier on.
Yes, absolutely.
So I thought,
you do them in year one.
Exactly. So I thought we'll go running on, the huge wage bill
Yes.
from that IMF has been talking about for many years.
Yeah.
And also the development budget. Simply, we've talked about the ROI to make sure that you look at the project and you scrutinize.
Yeah, you
what
do
are we
the high
getting?
return ones.
So I was quite surprised that the bulk still stayed in there.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. I mean, look, maybe they have
maybe
they've scrapped some projects, but to be honest, if they've scrapped some projects, they should have said so in the speech. It would have been a good credibility booster if they said, look, we're doing this lot of projects, but we're postponing or cancelling these other ones, which we don't think are justified.
Yeah.
And I don't know if they've done that because, we didn't hear it in the speech. One can go through the budget books line by line and see if there's things that have been cancelled. But I was a bit surprised that some projects which on the surface didn't really seem to be justified are still there. So, and then the other area where, again, maybe there's stuff happening if one looks at the line-by-line expenditure, but subventions to SOEs, have they been cut?
Yeah.
And I don't know, but there was nothing specific in the speech to say, right, we're going to cut the subvention to BPC from 2 billion to 1 billion or something like that, something that really needed to be done.
On the austerity side, with regard to efficiencies, stopping the leaks, there's a lot of mention of BRS and that type of thing. Do you think that side they got quite right? I was even telling somebody, this is where you need, remember, Elon Musk is supposed to be the Minister of Efficiency. Did he play the Minister of Efficiency?
Look, I think there's some good stuff there. So he's talking about the e-billing system for VAT, which has been on the cards for quite a while. I remember we first proposed that during COVID when we did the Economic Recovery and Transformation Plan. So that was 2020.
Yeah.
It's taken a long time, 5 years. I mean, to be honest, you could have just gone to Rwanda and got an off-the-shelf system in 6 months. Plugged it in. So anyway, it's taken
that would have been a huge public service for that matter.
So, it's taken us 5 years, but they have given a commitment that'll be up and running during the next financial year. And I think that's quite important. And then introducing a VAT on digital services, I think, is important. So, I think there's steps forward there. But, there's still, areas, which were mentioned, like the local authority rates collection. I mean, he told us, there's 700 million owing. Well, that's fine. We know that. What's going to happen? What are the local authorities going to do to go out and collect that stuff? Because that would make a huge difference to council finances and would enable government to reduce the subventions. So there was some good stuff there, but I think, in general, we need the detail of what's actually going to be done.
Do you think the message is really getting there in terms of the diamond story? I mean, I tell people I'm a miner. I know these things finish.
No,
and
I don't think so. In fact, it's interesting. Today I got an email from one of the diamond journalists out there.
Yeah.
And he said, tell me, why is the government of Botswana so bullish about diamonds in the budget speech compared to De Beers, who are managing expectations downwards? And I said, I don't know. I don't see the basis for this bullishness about recovery is going to happen and mineral revenues are going to go back up. I don't see it.
Is it structural or cyclical? Or the debate rings on?
I think it's structural. I think that, as time goes on, the more likely it is that it's structural. And when you look at the drivers, I mean, lab-grown diamonds, they're not going away.
Yeah.
China...
And they're plugging the green aspect to it, which is appealing to the millennials and the Gen Zs.
Absolutely. And so, China, big market, almost dead. And you might think, well, okay, China's going to come back. But at one point, Japan was a huge market for diamonds.
Yeah.
Japan was the second
things are
largest.
quiet about Japan. What happened?
And it's gone as a diamond market.
But nobody's even talking about Japan. It's just
So just because a country was a big market at one point doesn't mean it's going to, once it disappears, doesn't mean it's going to come back. So I worry that actually it's structural. And now we've got all this uncertainty about the future of De Beers. De Beers is up for sale. Anglo are struggling to find a buyer. I think
Botswana can't afford.
Can't afford. I think next week when Anglo release their financials, we're going to get some very bad news.
Yeah.
About De Beers. So, De Beers have been the industry driver. So if the Anglo De Beers axis is not there in the global diamond industry, that's, these are all structural changes. So, I worry that it's structural. And look, the industry is not going to disappear, but is it going to come back to where it was? I think it's looking less and less likely.
Sure. You're scaring me as well.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then the last one is the running out of money, the net financial asset. I always worry that graph every time you put it up.
Yeah.
Can you say a little bit more about that?
So the net financial assets is made up of two things. Firstly, it's the assets, which we have, money sitting in the bank, or the government has, sitting in Bank of Botswana. So that's your assets. And then there are financial liabilities, which is essentially debt.
Debt, yeah.
So the net part of it is that you take the assets and you subtract the liabilities. And so, as we know and as we've discussed in the past, basically the assets have gone. They're down to zero. But we're running up more and more debt. So the net financial assets is continuing to go more and more negative.
It used to be 100% of GDP.
It used to be 100% of GDP. Now it's down to minus 25 or something like that. And it's going further downwards.
Keith, if we're in a country, I mean, let's say we're in the UK, or even a congressman in the States, there will be like a commission to investigate. Am I right?
Yes.
Because of just the enormity.
Most governments do have negative net financial assets. So it's not unusual for a country to have a lot of debt. But
like the States, I think.
Like the States. The problem in our case is that we initially built up those financial assets as a replacement for the mining of diamonds, which were being depleted. So at least we thought, okay, when the diamonds have gone, as you say, eventually they're gone, we'll have money in the bank. That was the plan. We haven't stuck to it. So that's why if you're becoming a post-mining economy, not to have that money sitting in the bank, to have positive net financial assets, it means you haven't really managed you haven't managed your national balance sheets well, because you've depleted mineral assets, but you haven't replaced them with financial assets. Of course, the financial assets, the idea is you've got this asset sitting in the bank and it will generate you an income to replace the mineral revenues, which you're no longer getting. So, essentially we didn't ring fence, we didn't safeguard that financial asset when it was hugely positive.
Sure.
Anyway.
Yeah, no, great stuff. Thanks a lot, Keith. It's always a pleasure, man.
Sure.
All right. Cheers. Good to see you. All right. Okay, it's all buzzing here at the post-budget conference by FNB. And we are here again with Growth Well Podcast, and we are talking to some of the speakers. And one of the speakers today was Gomolemo Basele, economist at FNB, the bank itself. So, Gomolemo, you presented on, again, we're all doing the analysis of the budget. Where is Botswana going? How did the new government do in positioning us for the future? So, what did you think? What is your take, and what are the main highlights of your talk earlier on?
Great. So firstly, thanks for having me on. I think there were a few key things that stood out. that we discussed in the morning, and we've also discussed them this evening as well. So from the morning, some of the key points that stood out, which I also included in my presentation, were the difficult backdrop that we find ourselves in. So economic activity, mining activity being down is something that's transcended all presentations that have come through tonight. And what a difficult position that put the Minister of Finance in terms of the budget that he delivered this year. I think what also came out of that was the fact that given that mineral revenues are expected to remain low for a protracted period of time, we've also seen that SACU receipts are now hailed as the largest single contributor to our revenue. But what this also points to is the fact that the government is going to need to look at other ways to try and finance this deficit, including, for example, borrowing. So increased borrowing is something we expect to see from the government. But I think...
Before you carry on, increased borrowing, but there are limits in terms of how much you can borrow in terms of limits from a country rating point of view. So what are the limits and what is the room that Botswana can still maneuver to be able to borrow still?
So the statutory rule that we've set is 40% GDP.
40%,
right?
Okay.
And the ideal split is 20% domestic, 20% external debt.
Okay.
But we've seen that it's heavily skewed towards domestic debt. So we've seen it ramping up quite significantly in the recent past. And part of that was to try to take advantage of the pension funds that we're expecting to come back. But given what we've seen in terms of market dynamics more recently, it's looking less and less likely that the domestic market can fully fund the deficit that we're likely to experience as a country. So I think what will be interesting is to see how the government then seeks to attract or partner with external parties to try and fund that shortfall in the required funding.
Because we still have room to be able to borrow. I think, what is it, around 30% now in terms of, so we still have a bit of room?
Yeah, so we're at around 25.8%, so there's still quite a bit of capacity.
Okay. But what does the tendency to start borrowing? I talked earlier about how our forefathers used to be very conservative when it comes to this in terms of debt and, living small and tight and frugal. And now we seem to be sort of stealing from the kitty, if you may. So what does this mean in terms of the borrowing now and such a high deficit, despite all the concerns about the deficit? What does it mean?
So that's interesting. You spoke very well about it, and I appreciated that segment as well, about our forefathers being frugal. And that frugality, I believe, as well as the fiscal rules that have been set, were for dire times. And I think we'd also agree in terms of how we're looking at the diamond outlook, beyond it just being a V-shaped recovery in terms of it being a cyclical hiccup, essentially, that there's likely to be more structural. So we are in those dire times where those fiscal rules are there to serve us. So we need to take advantage of them, but also as we do that, reimagine, relook at policies like you had mentioned to ensure that we get the desired outcome out of the key sectors that we've also highlighted for diversification. So the time to act is now. I know we've said that many, many times before, but traditionally, and we saw other presenters also presenting it, is that a slump usually lasts for a year. This is the second year of the slump, and we're pushing the expected recovery further and further back.
Now, you guys do forecasts, and I'd like you to paint a picture going forward so that Botswana, being wherever can see whether there is, there is always an old saying about economists. Economists are so poor at forecasting. Now, I'm sure you guys have thought about it. Now, with the current problems of diamond, structural or cyclic, and then also government expenditure, we saw that we still have a very high development budget that was there. And how do you see this now translate? How do you see Botswana in 3 years in terms of the impact on the ordinary? Is there a bit of confidence or mixed, or you are quite concerned? What is your take?
Great. So I think just generally from a macroeconomic standpoint, the outlook is less positive than what we've traditionally been used to as a nation. So in terms of growth averages, for example, I think it's highly unlikely that even if the diamond market recovers, we're going to see a growth average of around 4%. So this, so that was our traditional, growth average. 4%. And, for example, we agree that last year was a recession. The Minister of Finance highlighted that growth is expected to have contracted by 3.3%, but they expect a rebound this year of around 3.5%, which we think is extremely bullish, given the fact that the recovery in diamond activity, even according from the ministry's standpoint, is towards the tail end of the year. So we're entering 2025 with no real growth driver. And if we also acknowledge the fact that synthetics are becoming a very real threat to Botswana's growth, as well as fiscal revenue opportunities, and as they consider to take a greater market share, we are unlikely to produce the same level of diamonds that we've seen historically. So the cuts in production that we've seen all the way up from a De Beers standpoint are likely to be more or longer lasting than we actually expect them to be. So I think outside of any significant moves being made towards actually unlocking growth along other sectors of the economy, growth will not reach that 4% average. So we expect it to recover to around 1.5% this year, mainly owing to the low base that we're coming off, and then just gradually linger around 3.2, 3.5% heading into the medium term. So that's a concern.
Sobering, yeah. So it still will be very, very, very sluggish. Yeah.
Exactly. So even going forward, there's limited room in terms of what we're able to do from a fiscal standpoint because we're getting less in. And then you mentioned development expenditure being quite elevated this year, which is a concern because the recovery within the mining sector or diamond mining activity is still not yet evident. But I think there's some elements that might delay the delivery of some projects this year. Currently, the development manager model
has been reviewed. Review.
And there's no set indication of when that review will conclude. And once that's done, we don't know what remedial measures are then necessary, which might affect, obviously, project delivery. And then public procurement and regulatory authority also receiving some attention, and I think this came out in the budget, in terms of setting up the appropriate structures around it to ensure that it's effective. So public procurement and regulatory authority, that's how government buys things. So until those issues are solved, we might see some of the plans or some of the projects that have been highlighted for this year actually
not actually,
just because of the structural issues that still need to be addressed.
So from your outlook, very cautionary outlook from this year to next year in the short to medium term. Am I right?
I think in the short term, definitely a cautionary outlook until signs of recovery start to become more evident. Or signs of financing.
Okay. Last question. What was the tastiest thing for an economist that came out of the budget yesterday?
The tastiest, I wouldn't say it was tasty in the good sense, but I think a proper or an acknowledgement of the current circumstance we find ourselves in, as well as proper articulation of the difficulties. Even though the budget, in terms of development, like you say, may have been a bit surprising
in terms of size. Yes.
But laying the foundation in terms of where we currently find ourselves, public finances, some of the key challenges, I think that was tasty in the sense that at least we are awake to how urgent the current situation is.
Yeah, appreciate the reality.
Yes.
Okay. No, great stuff. Thanks so much, Gomolemo.
Thanks.
Appreciate it. Okay, now we have retail manager at FNB, right from the face of things, Monkgogi Mogorosi. Welcome, Monkgogi.
Thank you very much.
Good to have a wonderful job as an MC. She was the MC in the house. Wonderful. So you had a privilege of obviously getting us on the stage and listening to every piece of the presentation. So I think the big thing, obviously, from the budget yesterday and from all the experts that submitted today, what do you think what were your really key things that stood out from all those presentations?
I think the common thread from all the presentations was that something fundamentally needs to change. And for me, that something is our way of thinking and our way of doing things. There's increased dissatisfaction or low appetite for complacency in the way we do things. We make decisions, but we hardly ever follow through, and it has cost us money. It has cost us money, and as a country, it's time that we realize that the way we used to do things is what has led us here. And we need to make better decisions going forward. We make decisions, we move a little bit quicker. We have what it takes to turn this picture around, but what the measure of success would be how differently we do things going forward. We make lots of promises. We go through budget speeches every year and lots of infrastructure projects are being flighted, but we look around and we say, but where did all that money go?
What's there to show? Yeah.
So, and then again, the reliance on diamonds to drive the economy has cost us as well.
Yeah.
We've been talking about economic diversification for forever. We are nowhere near that. So I think policy reforms, but again, decisiveness, speed of execution, I believe is what's going to take us there.
Monkgogi, what is the problem of, I think all these people are very learned people. All these people are on leadership because somebody saw something in them.
Yeah.
So why do you think there is that being a bit stuck in the mud of making the right decisions for a country that I believe most of us love it?
Yeah.
What's the blockage from? I know you talked about mindset change, which has been a buzzword for a few years now.
It has been. But I think, it was a theme, but what we didn't call out specifically was what is it that we needed to change.
Mm-hmm.
We've had the right people, in most cases, sitting in the right positions, but there was a lot of red tape. If I listened to Mama Darling, the way she was explaining what they've uncovered in terms of the way we've been doing things, we've allowed for a lot of complacency in the system. We've allowed for a lot of red tape. There's something that I like calling a khotla mentality, where we like to consult and consult and consult. We'll spend money 5 years doing research, and that amounts to
workshops
nothing.
and conferences.
Workshops, traveling everywhere. Let's just make a decision about what needs to happen to turn this picture around now. Once that decision is made, let's execute as quickly as possible. So I think that's part of the change that needs to happen.
Do you think a crisis like this can help us maybe a bit of fire under the feet? Because I always tell people, like, from the 2009 crisis, maybe the crisis was not long enough for us to smell the coffee. Do you think,
I'm hoping it really does, right? I'm hoping it does. I think us as a people, we've been cushioned for so long. We haven't seen the worst. It doesn't help that we get a lot of government subsidies. That has also spoiled us. So when you compare us with others, our neighboring countries, and you look at the passion and the hunger to get things done, we don't have that fire in our belly. So I'm hoping through this that we will wake up and realize that if we don't do something now, generations to come will blame us because we are the leaders of the season right now. Something has to change.
Yeah, because otherwise, if the diamonds really get hit and it becomes a structural problem in the market, we could be facing the eye of the storm.
That's it. I think we're approaching it slowly.
You from your work, obviously you got thousands and thousands of customers, and now listening to what's been said, and yesterday from the budget, for a normal person who walks into your bank, what does it mean for her or him, just from your final take?
So I think my biggest takeaway...
As we say, Motswana ko gae.
Motswana ko gae. For Motswana ko gae, I think the culture of go itirela is what we need to take away from this thing. We rely a lot on employers, right? The spirit of entrepreneurship is very, very low. So now job security is at threat. We're seeing restructurings happening everywhere, but we're also deep in debt. So if I was to lose my job tomorrow, what would become of me? So we are in the business of assisting Botswana to get facilities to improve their lives. However, what we tend to see also is sometimes we take loans just to go on vacation. If you can't afford it, don't do it. So we promote giving facilities to actually put into an investment for assets that can help build a legacy for generations to come. So I think for Motswana ko gae, we need to change our relationship with money. We need to make better financial decisions because the future is no longer as secure as we thought it was. We look at the way free services have degraded. Can you afford to pay for your medical bills in the private? So if you lose, a lot of us depend on medical aid, which is mostly funded by the employer. So if you lose your job tomorrow, you can't afford to go to a private doctor, what becomes of you? So these are the harsh realities.
Really
we need to look at the way we've been cushioned and realize that it's not sustainable. The threat is real. And it's a wake-up call for all of us to do things slightly differently and improve on our culture of saving. We live hand to mouth.
And just to give you an example, I used Singapore as an example. You know that Singapore, they made it compulsory law that every citizen has to save 20% of their income. And that actually builds capital in the markets.
Nice.
And people could now get health service and stuff like that. So I think, and now we are almost living in a debt country, isn't it, in terms of level of debt.
Yep.
So this is that need to shift, as you say. We need to shift and
That's
understand now savings become even more and more important.
I mean, I do love that we're a democratic country, but if you look at some of the success stories in markets that have really turned that picture around, there was some level of dictatorship behind it. Decisiveness by leadership and speed of execution.
It's very important.
It's very important.
Yeah.
So we can't keep talking for forever. We need to act. So fundamental changes like that, just the leadership standing up and saying, you know what, we're going to help you help yourself.
Exactly. And have
This is what
incentives.
you
You
need to
save, we give you those incentives.
That's
Just to encourage the nation.
That's it.
Cool. Now, which question should I have asked you and I didn't ask you? As a final question.
You should have asked me how I felt standing on the stage as
Talk
the
to
MC
me,
for
baby.
the first time.
Well, the first time. And you did so well.
I was never...
Really?
You didn't see how I fumbled in the beginning. I was like, yo, but but I appreciate the opportunity.
You ended up very well. Yeah.
I got myself out of my comfort zone. So at least I've lived the change that I'm preaching.
That you're talking about, exactly.
That's it.
Yeah.
Let's keep testing
your
ourselves.
own
We push
mindset
boundaries. My mind has changed now.
Yeah.
I now have been opened to the endless world of possibilities.
Wonderful.
So the self-doubt that I had when I got on stage to say, can I really pull this off? Looking at the crowd and my nerves, legs shaking, I'm like, okay, I've overcome that. Now it has given me the zeal to say, what else can I do?
What's possible?
What else can I try out? So I'm pushing my own limits and I'm excited. And then I'm hoping we all get to put ourselves in uncomfortable situations so that we can see what we're
Test
capable
what you can
of.
do, your
That's
potential.
it.
Wonderful way to stop.
Thank you.